You know, and before we go, I was a little bit nervous about having you on just because I know you kind of been through.
Okay, there you go. Cool. So as you can hear, that's Theo. So let's rang that a bit forward here. Alrighty. So this was an episode of this past weekend, Theo Vaughan's podcast, and he recently had Bryan Callen on, and he was talking a little bit about his cancellation and how it's kind of felt to go through what he went through, how it's difficult to deal with. And I don't know, I've got some points to basically add on to this, because I still think Bryan hasn't necessarily, maybe it's hard when you're going through it, but it doesn't feel like he's really understood the severity of the situation that he went through and just how disastrously bad he dealt with it in general. Again, I'm a fan of the guy, I like him, but God almighty, he dealt with his situation terribly. So this is Theo Vaughn and Bryan Callen talking on the show now.
You know, and before we go, I was a little bit nervous about having you on just because I know you kind of been through a lot over the past year. Has it been tough to what's it been like for you, man?
Terrible.
Has it been?
Yeah, the worst.
Yeah.
Because you can't fight back. There's nothing you can do. Just the way it is. And it's very interesting because you get ready for whatever come what may in life, right? And then something comes along that you don't even know how to fight against. How the fuck do you fight something like that? How in the world do you, when you never in a million years thought something like that would happen? In a million years, because you've tried to live your life the best,
right,
helping everybody. And I don't know, I can just only, I'm not spiritual enough, but you got to just kind of figure out how to pivot. But it's real, and it's got lasting consequences, and it's true destruction. But the question is, who are you in destruction? Who are you when chaos hits? Who are you when everything is taken from you that you've built over 30 years? And
I guess it's interesting, right? Number one, Theo to go out there and basically admit that he was nervous to have Bryan Callen on the show because of the accusations, which says a lot, again, about the scene in general, right? It says a lot about a little community where they're all happy, they're all okay having each other on their shows to boost numbers, gain new audience, shoot the shit with peers, whatever it may be. And in the moment the person has, again, don't get me wrong, it's not like he got caught, stealing money or something. This is a serious accusation, being accused of rape. But you'd expect when you're, really down on your luck and you really need some help, that your friends will come and try and help you out and pull you out of it, support you publicly. Especially publicly, I would assume more so in Hollywood, because it's all about the public image, it's all about the persona, how things look. It's less about what you can prove, which is sickening, but it is what it is. So for him to have kind of gone through that entire thing and not have any support or backing, especially from the people who you would say know him the best, especially from what we see online. Again, we don't know these people, we don't know what they do in their private time and who they hang out with, but from what we saw online, they spent a lot of time together, right? Recording podcasts, doing shows and that. And then suddenly, for all that to just go, everyone to vanish, leave you on your own after everything you've done for them, especially when you consider the Friday Night Kid outside of Joe Rogan was probably the best and biggest platform for a lot of that early comedy scene to kind of get going, reach a new fan base, sell more tickets, get more dates, blah, 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 blah. They did a lot for people, right? And when it really came down to it and he needed help, no one came out there and helped him, let alone, let's not even talk about Joe. Joe didn't do one thing. He's not even mentioned, I think he's mentioned his name, I don't know, less than 5 times. I listen to the show a lot, the Joe Rogan podcast, right? Joe Rogan Experience. And he's mentioned Bryan's name in passing maybe 5 times, but nothing of any sort of support, which makes sense, right? Because like I said, I still think there is a part of this guy that doesn't really, which is maybe that's what cancellation does to you. He doesn't really he hasn't really processed what the gravity of the situation. Like, he didn't get accused of like stealing money, of like faking something in his CV. Getting accused of rape is really serious. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't know how you're meant to deal with it. I think we've seen only one instance of somebody dealing with it really well, right? Some sort of rape or abuse, and that was Justin Bieber. And he's kind of fortunate because he's Justin Bieber, for fuck's sake, and also he's young. So whenever he was about running around town, he was always using a social media app. So whatever accusation comes his way, he's probably got a paper trail of some sort he can refer to, and he did just that, right? He got He got into the DMs, he exposed all the messages and basically put it out there that these girls were complete talking shit. I think he ended up suing them, right, for 20 mil or something. I'm not sure what's happened to that court case, but he was the only version so far that I've seen. But apart from that, everyone else, it just buries you, as it probably rightly should do, I think. I don't know. Again, I'm not a fan of cancel culture. I think by and large, regardless of what you do, your fans should be the ones that should decide your fate. Your fans should be the ones that put you on the stage, and your fans should also be the ones who relegate you to performing in bars. Like, that's how it always should be. I don't think organizations should do that. But the ironic part about this whole situation is that the reason why he really got cancelled wasn't because of the industry. It was more so to do with the fact that they decided to sell their or sell their podcast or whatever, or hand over the ad buying responsibilities to Cast Media. Cast Media are in charge of placing the ads on the podcast as they are with other shows, I'm assuming. From what I see online and the roster of people they've got, I don't really understand their business too tough, but it seems like they're in charge of ads. So because they're in charge of ads and they decide what goes where, they were able to tell both of those guys, Brendan and Bryan, hey, he can't come on the show whilst he's still got these accusations off his head, which inevitably led to him being removed from the public conversation. So if they were a little bit more, I don't know, I wouldn't say business savvy or whatever it may, if they were a little bit more patient and maybe took more of the ad buying responsibilities in their own self, right, in their own lane, in their own group, whatever, did it themselves, did it in-house, quote unquote, they would have been perfectly fine. Bryan would have had the opportunity to have a platform to speak his piece, continue doing his shows, get booked all of, because even during the whole allegations, no one stopped booking the guy. Even when, one of the women that accused him of rape, his husband went around calling up the comedy stores, everyone was happy to book him. So it wasn't like his career stopped. But what really fucked him, again, like I said, was their decision to partner up with Cast Media. That really put the nail in the coffin. And then on top of that, ironically enough, he's friends. Because throughout this whole period of time, now it's obviously a year has passed. Does it feel like a year? Maybe it feels like just under a year. Now that time has passed, you're seeing a lot more people coming out talking about him and having him on a show. But when it was hot, no one was willing to stand next to him and put their arm around him and say, hey, this is my friend, I'm going to back him, I'm sticking up for him. No one did that. None whatsoever. So it must be an odd bitter pill to swallow if you're someone like a Bryan Callen. Again, you've worked 30 years of your life trying to get to where you are at the moment. Like I said before, I'm a big fan of T-Fat-K in the beginning. Like, I know how Bryan was. He didn't necessarily love the podcast. He just did it because it was a fun time to hang out with his friend. He really wanted to be an actor. It always has been. Stand-up was always like a thing that he was just happened to be good at, in the same way that Brendan Schaub never wanted to be a UFC fighter, but he just he fell into it because he couldn't make it in the NFL. And for sure, Brendan was the one putting all the effort in. He was the real one putting the effort, driving the thing, putting out the merch, live shows, T-Fat-K 3D, all this shit. And then Bryan was just along with the ride because it was fun. Why not? So he never really treated it seriously. So it must hurt even more that, where it must hurt more that you're in a situation where you're on your own and no one's willing to come out and stand next to you. And then the podcast that you didn't take seriously is now functioning without you, not that well, judging by the numbers. They're obviously not doing, every time Bryan comes on, they clear 500,000 views easily within or 250,000 minimum within 2 days. So clearly Bryan's a draw there, at least on that show. But still, man, what's a bitter pill to swallow, innit? How cruel Hollywood is. Now that the dust has settled and things have quieted down a bit, people want to have him on their show, talk to him and shit. But when it was really sticky and the knives were out and it seemed like, that lady from Los Angeles Times had it in for everybody and she was wanting to take down the entire LA comedy scene, no one wanted to say a word about him. Nobody. And now that it's safe to kind of peer out, from underneath the flipping covers, people are willing to have them on the show. Maybe it's part of Hollywood. You can't just be, it's impossible to be bitter. You just can't hold resentment in your heart. But I would find it really difficult to look a lot of people in the face. I really would. The likes of the Whitney Cummings and stuff.